Hi, I'm Art Bergeron, and if you haven't seen this show before, welcome to Frank and Mary here on Nantucket. My day job as an elder law attorney at Myrick O'Connell, but this is not about my day job. This is about my friends Frank and Mary. If you haven't seen any of my presentations at the Salt Marsh, you know that Frank and Mary's goal in life is to live in their house until they die and be buried in the backyard. And if that means they live here, they never want to leave this island. The question then is, who are the people that you need to know? If you like Frank and Mary, who are the people you need to know, and what are the programs you need to know about so that you can stay on Nantucket for the rest of your life? So a few people here know me. Many people know Allison Forsgren, who has been here like forever, and has been kind enough to be my co-host over the last few years. And she finds these great guests, and she's got a wonderful person for us today whom you really should know about, right? Because he's a new person to the kind of the structure of Nantucket government, but is doing something really, really important. So, Allison, whom do we have today?
Today we have the very first Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion on Nantucket. Kimal McCarthy is the man, and we're excited to hear about what it is that you're doing or want to do in this new position. It's great that you're with us.
And as I mentioned to you, Kimal, when we started, I get to ask the first big question, which is, how did you get here? Because there inevitably are all these different stories, right? There are a few of the locals who actually came from here, but most people kind of wandered in somehow through the beach. So could you just kind of talk about how you got here, how you got to this position, you know, what's great about Nantucket, or what's not? No, I don't want to go there. So just kind of talk about that, if you could.
Sure. Well, first of all, I'll start off by saying thank you for having me. I've heard about Frank and Mary, and being in this position and having this opportunity is really great. So thank you. To answer your question, my mom met my stepdad here in Nantucket, and I moved to the island when I was 13 years old. So I've been here since middle school. I had Barbara White as my homeroom and history teacher. I don't know, I know a lot of people have had Barbara White, so I like to mention the fact that I'm taught by her as well as by Peter Panchi, and I went through the high school system and came back after college and grad school, and I'm now writing my dissertation on the African Meeting House. So Nantucket's home for me.
That's a great backstory. That's a great backstory. And yes, we've seen. So did you have Allison? Is it Joe? Who was the person who was who was at the high school and is running NCEA?
Joe Aguirre.
Mm-hmm. Did you have Joe Aguirre when you were at the high school?
He was my principal at one time.
Oh yeah. So everybody's gone through. You know, he's got all these proud graduates that we have on this show. It's a wonderful thing. So thank you for coming on.
And I love it that there are so many people who are working in town government that really have Nantucket as their home. I mean, we're really lucky to have so many people who care so much about Nantucket involved. So tell us what it's like to be the first director of such a lofty sounding position.
It's new. The position is new. The responsibilities are new. And quite honestly, I'm just trying to figure it out as I go. Technically, today has made maybe 3 months since I've started in this position. My proudest thing so far has been coming up with the mission statement for the office, quite honestly, which is to be the primary resource for Nantucket's diverse communities and organizations, and to make sure that our community is being equitable and inclusive of all residents, and for employees to feel safe and welcome as well, too.
That's a nice one.
So that's the first thing that I've been again, my biggest accomplishment since being in the position. But I've been attending a lot of webinars, a lot of different trainings, doing my own research to get a better understanding of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Those are, as you mentioned, very loaded words, really. And quite frankly, sometimes they're used interchangeably. So what I'm really making sure that I do is at least know the difference between them. I think the most simplified version is that I believe someone put it this way, that diversity is making sure that everyone's invited to the party. Equity is making sure that everyone has a chance to be to contribute to picking the songs that are played. Whereas inclusion is making sure that everyone has a chance to dance. So that's the most simplified way to simplify my job title.
And so you mentioned writing your dissertation on the African Meeting House. What, what is your background?
That's a good question. So I did my undergrad at Bates in political science, and then I went off to UMass Amherst and got a master's degree in labor studies. And right now I'm at Northeastern doing my doctorate in organizational leadership specifically. And it just so happens that the way the program works is that it is intended that you write your dissertation on the job that you're at. And I was at the African Meeting House as the associate director before coming into this position. And I'm so far along the way that I didn't want to start over. So I decided to just stick to what I was writing about.
Wow. Wow. That's actually quite an educational background.
Thank you.
So I'm curious, when you're thinking about this job, which obviously has a whole bunch of different pieces to it, can you just talk to us about how you imagine implementing what you just said, and is that an implementation that only involves, I shouldn't say that only, that involves government, that is the offices, of the government, and that certainly includes the schools, right? And because you've got a lot of folks that are employed at the schools, and that's a big function of the town, is the schools. But does it also include making people aware of and connecting people to this work who are in the private sector? Because it just sounds like it's a lot, and it's one of those things that does sound very lofty until you go through like a year like we had over this past year, and you start saying, boy, this is really important. This is very, very day-to-day, stuff. This is, it's hard. So I'm just curious about how you think about it right now.
So that's a very good question. I think the best way for us to look at it, or the best way that I've been approaching it initially, was to just the job is specifically for town government. Let's start off there. As well as making sure that the employees of the town feel as though they have an office or a space or a person that they can come to talk about issues that are related to DEI. So initially, it's a part of, like I mentioned early in the mission statement, it's about reaching the entire diverse community as communities on Nantucket. So whether that's people that are a member of the Latinx community, the AAPI, Asian American Pacific Islander community, Nantucket has a large Jamaican population, as well as African American, just Black in general, as I like to say. So there are many just different ethnic groups and minority groups on Nantucket, but this position really is also making sure that we're an outlet for not only people of color, but for women as well too, for the LGBTQIA plus community, for people with disabilities. So as you hit the nail on the head in your question, is that it is a very lofty position, quite frankly, and it's my responsibility to figure out how to narrow that, how to make it more focused and more tailored, to be a resource for private organizations and nonprofits, which you also mentioned. So in other words, I'm still figuring it out.
Mm-hmm. And so how do you see yourself as a resource to people who live in the town? Like if people, want to learn more about what you do or want to help out in some way, how do you see yourself in that position when it relates to the town citizens?
Another good question. So I guess I'll answer that in two separate ways. One, I am doing what I call a DEI presentation. And so I've gone to the Community Foundation for Nantucket as well as the Rotary Club just to share what I'd like a scope of what the DEI office is all about, or what we are hoping to do. And then the second part of my answer will be in regards to creating a listening tour. So I'm formatting so the first one, I do a lot of talking and just tell people about myself, what DEI is all about, definitions and so forth. Whereas the listening tour, which I'm still working on creating right now, is more me listening and me getting a better understanding of what the community wants a DEI office and director to be doing. Because I can bring all of like what I think the DEI position should be all about, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to match up with what the community members themselves want. So I think that's the primary part of me trying to create a listening tour. And I might add also that the town has put out a request for a proposal to get a consultant to specifically help me to narrow what this office is supposed to be focusing on. So those are like 3 separate answers to that question.
And so are there other people in this position that you can look to for guidance? Or, I mean, since it's a brand new position and sort of a brand new category of positions, you know, where do you go for inspiration and you know, maybe a little guidance?
That's a good question. So I go to my supervisor. So that's the primary person I go to if there's like a question, or if I'm going to start a new idea or something that I think could be interesting for the town, I go to them first.
Who is that?
Go ahead.
And so who do you go to? I missed that.
No, so my supervisor is the town manager. So, but outside of that, I am really, again, not only just figuring it out as I go, but also looking at other DEI offices around like the Commonwealth. I know it's around the country as well. As you mentioned, it is a brand new position. I believe Provincetown and Falmouth just created a DEI director position in both of those towns as well. But Cambridge and Boston has already have one. So I researched their website and things that they are doing. I was recently a part of a, I believe it's the International City Managers Association webinar training with, which is specifically focused on inclusion, and just a bunch of different people from around the United States just sharing their ideas on how to do this work. So I have resources at my fingertips. I'm also trying to find resources at the same time. So it's just going out and doing my best, really, and making the best of it.
Well, you got great communication skills. You know, I mean, what else do you need, really?
And he's a local. That's, you know, that's a wonderful edge, I think, you know, just to be starting off. It gives you kind of instant credibility, you know, that you know, you grew up in the system, which is like terrific. So I'm just curious from the seminars you've participated in, from the people that you've talked to, is there one place, you know, a city or a town that you've heard about, or that you've heard a presentation about, that you just came out and said to yourself, "Ooh, they seem to be getting this right," you know? Because I suppose that's one of the interesting things about what you're doing is, as you've said, this is new. It's just kind of happening. This kind of realization of the importance of looking at this, both from the government and from the community perspective, is just kind of is popping up in a lot of places. So I'm just curious as to whether you found any places, and I would, you know, my intuition would be that it would be in larger government structures. It would be in a place like a Cambridge, in an environment in a larger community where they've been looking at these things for quite a while, and maybe where there was, you know, where there was a bigger staff, and so it was just kind of included. So I'm just curious.
So another good question. I think what I found so far is that really everyone is trying to figure this out together. And that's probably the best answer. One of the things that one of the presenters in one of the trainings that I recently attended, or webinars rather, was saying is that if there was a town that had the right answer or a format to follow, then everyone would just go to that town website and resources and just follow what they're doing. Interestingly enough, even if there was such a place, I don't think that's necessarily going to be adaptable to Nantucket, because this island is so unique within itself. So whatever that place or location was, it would still have to put a Nantucket spin on it to some degree. And I think living here for so long, that has allowed me to do so, or that will be, I guess, included in the process. So I do know the individuals that I can turn to in the town, primarily whether, again, I mentioned Barbara White or Francis Cartoonan, or just people that have a better historical aspect of Nantucket, and just ask for their advice and their opinion on the process.
You know, the whole town government set up on Nantucket being its own town, its own county, and being 30 miles at sea is really a challenge to all of the departments when it comes to, you know, finding the correct resources and implementing, ideas that could be easy in other places, but are really not that easy here, which leads me to the question, what are the challenges that you've come up with so far when it comes to anything having to do with your position?
So I've expressed this before with just other members, and another good question. And I think my biggest challenge right now is the fact that I don't speak Spanish. Nantucket has a large Spanish-speaking population,
Right.
and I really want not only English speakers, but speakers of multiple languages that are here on the island to see this office as a resource for them. So one of the first things that I did when I was creating the mission statement, which I mentioned earlier, was to make sure that it was translated in Spanish on the DEI website as well, webpage also. So I have gone out and reached to just different Latinx community members, and to my own surprise, there's at least 7 or 8 different Latinx nationalities that I just didn't know was on the island. And so just learning that alone, or like trying to figure out ways to reach the Latinx community, I think is going to be my biggest challenge for sure.
So if you could speak 3 new languages, what would they be?
Good question. Probably Spanish, being one of them. Not, I don't know, maybe Russian. I probably wouldn't know how to learn Russian actually. But I'm just gonna stick to Spanish for now, and hopefully the other 2 would just come whenever they are needed.
Right. No,
So-
we have a much different community makeup in the last 10 years than, the leaps and bounds we've taken when it comes to diversity is enormous. So good time for someone like you.
Thank you.
And you really speak to the fact that, it's like for folks who don't speak Spanish, you tend to blend the Spanish and the Brazilian population, right? You tend to say, oh, well, they just all speak kind of like not English, but in a way that's similar. Whereas, of course, you talk to the Brazilian speakers or I don't believe there's a large Azorian population in Nantucket, but I know that in one of my home communities, there's actually a real, I don't want to say a tension, but a definite competition between the Brazilian community and the Azorian community, who both speak different versions of Portuguese, who unite in the fact that they don't want to be thinking, you don't want to be called Hispanic. They're not Hispanic, but you really speak to the fact each community wants to be thought of as their own. I guess, which relates to a question I had. So if people want to connect with you, and this is, the purpose of this show is for people to be just kind of aware of things that they might not have been aware of that are on the island. If people want to connect with you, like how do they find you? And when you're talking about this listening tour, if I'm one of those groups, how do I get on your tour?
Good question. I think before I answer your question, I will like to just quickly point out that Nantucket does have a sizable Cape Verdean population. And as a DEI director, I should probably mention that. Otherwise, they may come marching down to the town building looking for me. But to reach me, I'm in the town building. I am literally right by Federal Street. My contact information is on the town website as well too. So I hope I come off as approachable. So if you see me in the street or in the supermarket, you're welcome to say hi or so forth. What I am doing as far as the tour is concerned is that I am reaching out to organizations. I am going to be starting off hopefully with a teachers group at the high school, at the middle school, sorry, that has, I believe it's the anti-racist, anti-bias subgroup of some sort that's at the school. And my reason for starting out with them is because they have the language already in regards to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and may feel more comfortable talking about it. This is a difficult topic, and I think the one thing that I have learned since being in this position is that its motto is to just get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Quite honestly, sometimes I am uncomfortable as well too, and I am hoping that I don't say the wrong thing. So I think by starting off by reaching out to groups, that might be the best approach to start the listening tour, as well as to, as I mentioned earlier, do the presentation on what the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Office is all about. But again, I invite organizations like the Rotary Club reached out to me for me to do that presentation, so they're welcome to contact me at any time.
Wow.
But I suppose you get to the heart of the question. It often is an uncomfortable conversation because you're kind of a lot of times being forced to confront concerns that you might have about other races, about sexual orientation, that you just as soon pass it, But I think I think you're really getting to the point that the bottom line is all of these issues are best confronted when not in a crisis situation. Right.
Correct. And this position, at least, is going to have that opportunity for it to be an ongoing dialogue, an ongoing learning process where we can learn from each other experiences and actually share things and learn together to reach shared understandings. So I'm hoping that I will be able to champion that process as best as possible.
I think it's interesting to point out that pretty much everybody is uncomfortable around the topic. I mean, I don't know anyone who feels like they're an authority or has the answers. So it was interesting to hear you say that even you sometimes feel uncomfortable. But I look forward to seeing how you do what you do and joining a listening tour at some point in time. And if there's anything that we can do to sort of help support you and your efforts, I'm sure having you at the Salt Marsh and coming to the Council on Aging and, speaking to some of the population to whom this show is very popular would be great for our viewers. What do you think?
It would be my pleasure to do so.
And in the meantime, and I think that would be great. I think it would be wonderful. And I think if you're starting this listening tour, it would be really interesting, I think, for us to talk to you 6 months from now, after you've done some of this listening, right? To just kind of come back and share with many of the seniors, because I know a lot of our folks who watch are Frank and Mary, right? And they've been living here for a long time, but may not have been as in tune with kind of how things have changed, right? To give them your insight into how all of this has played out. And I want to make sure before and once again, one of my jobs I mentioned at the beginning is to keep time, and I'm watching at time going, oh, we're a little close here. Before we go, could you also give people, if people wanted to call you or email you, can you just give folks a number that they could find you?
Let me grab my business card off my desk so I can tell you my number. It is, the town's office is 508-228-7200, and I'm at extension 7344. And
Great.
As far as my email goes, it is K McCarthy. I'm sorry, K McCarthy is my brother. He works at the Plus office. My email is kr.mccarthy@nantucket-ma.gov. I still haven't learned that yet, but there's a lot to learn.
And we can run that on the screen too. So
Yes.
We'll have it in a legible form for people to take a look at as well.
So Allison, thank you very much for doing this. Kimal, thank you so much for doing what you're doing. This is it's a really important topic, right? And to have somebody who, from the perspective of all those groups, as well as from the perspective of the government, can be the person who can help everybody kind of work through these things is really a wonderful thing. And thank you, Allison, because this is really the point of this show, is to introduce Kimal, like you've introduced so many people on this show, to Frank and Mary, and to the folks who are at home who may not be actively involved in town government, but are really interested in the future of the town. So,
and I think it's great that Nantucket has stepped up and has created this position, and that we have someone leading it who's obviously very capable and also knowledgeable about the island. So thank you for taking the job.
So
thanks for those kind words, and thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you, and thank you, Allison. Folks, we hope you'd enjoy this. Once again, if you've got any questions, call Kimal. He's really interested. Or if you have any input for him about who he should be listening to on his listening tour. So thank you very much for watching. Thank you, Allison. Thank you, Kimal. Folks, we'll look forward to seeing you on the next installment of Frank and Mary here on Nantucket. Thank you very much.